On Thanksgiving, my dad posted a video mocking me. Look at this failure. The next day, my sister asked for $2,500. I walked away for good. And I was preparing the table for Thanksgiving like I always do. Plates, glasses, and silverware. That is how it begins every year. Everyone else lounged around like hotel guests, while I walked around the kitchen like a service member. It had gotten so commonplace that hardly one thanked me anymore. I performed the job, and they took it for granted. And this time, I told myself to be quiet and get through supper. My sister sat on the couch, pretending to giggle at something on her phone, while my brother yelled at the television since his team was losing. My father opened another beer before lunchtime. My mother was the only one who helped, silently slipping the bird into the oven. That was the last Thanksgiving I'd ever spend at that house. I simply didn't realize it yet. I didn't notice my father clutching his phone. He must have been recording me from the dining room as I was arranging the centerpieces. I wasn't doing anything remarkable. I was simply setting up the dishes evenly as I usually did, lest someone else take credit for how things appeared. I didn't notice the video till supper was already served. I was sitting across from my cousin Emily when she leaned in and asked, "Have you seen Facebook?" My phone vibrated. There was a notification. My father had shared a 14-second film of me folding napkins and setting forks. The caption stated, "Look at this failure. She was always a servant." My brother had already said, "Amo. She still thinks she's doing something." My sister said, "No lie though. Face with tears of joy. Face with tears of joy. Face with tears of joy." They were laughing across the table as if it were an inside joke, as if I weren't sitting right there. I did not say anything. I stood up, walked out of the dining room, grabbed my purse, and departed. Nobody followed me. I went out of that house and continued wandering for over 10 minutes before calling my Aunt Laura. She also departed the supper. She said she'd had enough of seeing them treat me like trash. She picked me up at the junction of Eastwood and 5th and took me to her home. That night, I lay down on her guest bed, completely clothed. I did not sleep. I just gazed at the ceiling, my phone facing down beside me. Being the family punchline is not something that happens all at once. It is sluggish. It develops. You let one thing go, then another, and before you know it, your father is putting you online as a joke, and your siblings are commenting as if it were their part-time job. What they didn't know was that I'd been discreetly saving, working 50 or more hours a week, not going out, not buying new clothing, foregoing vacations, and allowing my sister to borrow money without ever repaying it. I'd saved nearly $23,000. They assumed I was dumb, broke, and weak. That illusion was broken the next morning. My sister texted me at 8:12 a.m. "No. Are you okay? Or where are you?" He simply said, "Why can't I withdraw $2,500 from your account?" He was referring to my account. I phoned her. I did not shout. I did not weep. I simply said it plain. The joint account was closed, and everything was transferred. She flipped. I received 6 texts in a succession calling me selfish, manipulative, and resentful. She claimed she needed the money for urgent matters. Her concept of urgent is concert tickets and a bogus skincare brand. By lunchtime, my father had messaged me, not to apologize or check in, but just to say, "You've always been dramatic. Grow up." That's when I snapped. They did not know where I was. They believed I'd crawl back. They assumed this was simply another quiet treatment. But they were about to learn something I'd been keeping hidden for years. I wasn't just furious. I was finished. By Sunday morning, the stillness in their home must have become alien. No one was pounding pots, racing along the corridor, or asking if anybody needed anything. I was not present, and for the first time in years, no one was cleaning up the pieces. I did not respond to any of their texts. My Aunt Laura prepared waffles and coffee, and we sat on her porch for an hour without speaking. She was not the kind to press. She simply stated, "Whatever you decide, make sure it's not out of guilt." I nodded. My phone vibrated 5 times during breakfast. I did not check it once. Around lunchtime I opened my phone. Not because I cared about what they had to say. I only needed to validate what I had previously assumed. The first thing I saw was a new group chat between my siblings. I didn't ask to be added, yet there it was. The first communication was a photograph. My room drawers were pulled out. My mirror smashed. Makeup was crushed underfoot. Books lie on the floor like rubbish. My brother's post accompanying the photo simply stated, "Cleaning day," followed by a second message from him directly below it. "You should have packed your junk." I froze. I scrolled down and saw my sister say, "Don't worry, we saved your trash notebooks all." That was when I felt something move in my chest. I had not sobbed as I went out. I didn't weep when my father shared the video. But suddenly, sitting on a quiet porch with a phone full of proof that my own siblings, whom I had previously bought birthday cakes for, had demolished the last vestiges of my personal space, I felt a stinging sensation in my belly. I contacted my cousin Ben, who lived a few blocks from my parents. He'd always remained impartial and never got involved in the drama, yet I trusted him more than anybody else in the home. I asked him to stop by and check if anything could be salvaged. He did not even hesitate. He sent me 15 minutes later a snapshot of my laptop, passport, and a few documents resting in his front seat. That's all he could rescue. He told me not to return, that they had gone through every drawer, thrown stuff away, and even opened the safe box where I stored old letters and cards. He said my sister was kidding about burning my writings. I did not respond to that. I wasn't sure what to say. That did not sound like screaming. That night, my mother called. Her voice sounded low. She maintained she had no idea they were going to do that. She said she attempted to stop them. My father told her it was time to teach Rebecca a lesson. She apologized as if it would stick things back together. I did not shout at her. I just remained quiet. The quiet on the phone felt heavier than anything I could say. I still loved her, but something within me had changed forever. The next morning, I left my Aunt Laura's house and relocated to my Uncle Mike and Aunt Laura's residence on the other side of town. It was larger, calmer, and had a guest room with its own entrance. They did not ask for rent. My uncle just answered, "We'll figure it out later. For now, you rest." That evening, after dinner, he inquired if I was still considering renting an apartment. I told him yes. That I had previously looked at a studio near the bus stop. He looked at my Aunt Laura, then back at me and said, "You're not wasting your money on rent. Not yet. Not while you're still rebuilding." And then he said something unexpected. "You know your dad still owes me $7,000, right?" I hadn't forgotten. I blinked. He described how years ago when their roof collapsed in, my father asked him for a loan. He promised to pay it back in 6 months. That happened roughly 4 years ago. Nothing was reimbursed. I was going to remind him after the holidays, my uncle explained. But now though, I'm calling that debt forgiven, and not in a good way. He poured himself another glass of wine and then said, "Let him feel what it's like to be cut off." That's when I knew this was greater than me. I wasn't simply walking away from a terrible environment. I'd begun something I didn't intend to. My father, sister, and brother didn't realize it yet, but they weren't just losing me. They were losing folks around me. The ones who had remained silent for too long. They assumed they'd never take sides, but they did. And now both sides were evident. The entire week felt like I was watching a home burn from afar. Regardless of how many times I urged myself not to glance back, I kept looking for smoke. On Wednesday, my sister texted me a snapshot of her Sephora transaction that was denied. $210.50. Declined. She captioned it, "You're really this bitter." 5 minutes later, she added, "I needed that serum. You're seriously sick." The joint account was deactivated. I had given her too much for too long. When we originally opened it, I told myself it was only for emergencies. But her definition of an emergency was always something extravagant and ludicrous. She couldn't afford clothing, subscriptions, or dinner dates. She never offered to pay it back. When I started interrogating her, she became defensive. That's when I understood she wasn't confused. She was entitled. That afternoon, I decided to block her. By Thursday, my brother had joined in. He made a joke on his Instagram story, using a screenshot of my Facebook page and overlay writing, "Imagine ruining Thanksgiving over a napkin." He then contacted me immediately. "You made this a big deal. We didn't even say anything that bad. Grow thicker skin. Following that, come back and talk like a normal person. Regular person." This was coming from the same brother who once convinced me to pay his car insurance for 3 months while he spent weekends drinking and purchasing new speakers. The same brother who previously labeled me uninteresting because I refused to go into debt for pleasure. I didn't respond. I simply signed out of everything. But my cousin Ben, who had saved my paperwork, texted me later that night with an update. He stated my father had asked him if I intended to sue. That is the term he used. Not come home, not talk to us, not ask how she was doing, just sue. Mark said my father was concerned because he'd read that trashing someone's personal stuff, even within their own house, might result in legal ramifications, especially if any of it was precious or irreplaceable. I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed in days. No, I was not suing them. Not yet. Probably not ever. But the idea that he was concerned about me taking action was new. That was different. And then the most unexpected thing occurred. Friday morning, I received an email. Not from my father, my siblings, or my father's boss. I looked at it for a whole minute before opening it. It was courteous and brief, simply saying he was reaching out because he had seen the Facebook video that my father had uploaded and then erased, but it had already been spread. He did not say anything nasty. He just stated, "Wanted to check in and ask if you're okay." It turns out that someone in his workplace saw the video before it was removed and quietly distributed it around. My father works in a mid-sized contracting business with largely males. It's not the kind of environment where gossip spreads quickly, but this did, and someone felt it was worth escalating. I never responded to the email, but knowing that he had publicly disgraced himself, I suspected that the film intended to humiliate me. Would cost him something. It was an unusual type of tranquility. I didn't need vengeance. I did not need to fight him. He was doing an excellent job of killing himself. That weekend, I stayed indoors. My Aunt Laura and Uncle Mike gave me their whole attention, only coming in to see if I wanted to join supper. I did it once. We ate spaghetti and discussed nothing. It was pleasant and uncomplicated, but deep down, I was changing. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I was done pretending that my family would ever perceive me differently. I now had one job. Move onward. The weekend passed almost too calmly. I started looking for part-time weekend jobs mainly to keep my mind occupied. I wasn't ready to rent my own house yet. My uncle suggested I stay until I found something secure, but I needed to have control over something, anything. Monday morning my cousin Ben texted again. He'd returned to my parents' house to return a tool he'd borrowed months before. When he walked in, something unusual occurred. He stated, "My dad was sitting at the kitchen table writing letters like actual pen and paper letters." Ben claimed there were at least 3 already placed in a mound, all sealed. When Ben inquired what they were, my father said, "Just tying up some loose ends." Ben didn't think much of it until he departed and saw an envelope beneath his windshield wiper with my name on it. He delivered it directly to me. The envelope was too thick to hold just one letter. I glanced at it for quite some time before opening it. Inside there were 4 folded sheets of paper and 2 authentic photographs. One is of me as a baby in the hospital with my mother holding me, and the other is from a camping trip when I was 11. My father had his arm around me in the picture. We're both smiling at something off camera. I unfolded the pages. The first page was not an apology. It was a breakdown. Bullet points. Literally. "You were never easy to understand. You always acted like you were better than the rest of us. I'm not saying we were right, but you made it easy to ignore you." This followed. "Your sister has problems. We all know it. She uses people. She used you. You let her." The tone changed on the second page. Things became stranger. He began talking about things that did not make sense. He referenced a debt that he took out in my name 5 years ago. He said he used my ass and promised to pay it off before I noticed. They said it was too tiny to matter. He had no option at the moment. That's when I quit reading. I dashed to my uncle's office with the letter. He read it twice, pulled something up, and informed me that we were going to pull my credit report immediately. When it loaded, I was unable to talk. I simply gazed at the screen. There were 2 credit cards that I did not recognize. Both opened in my name. One held a $2,800 balance. The other was closed, but it still showed a missing payment from 3 years ago. He had truly done it. He had exploited my name to acquire money behind my back. He stole my identity and didn't tell me. I did not weep. I did not yell. I just sat there holding the hospital photos. My uncle rose up and left the room. 10 minutes later, I overheard him chatting on the phone. "Let's get serious." When he returned, he said, "We're reporting it today. You're not letting this slide." I couldn't believe it. My own father had committed fraud, and not just emotional manipulation, but genuine money crimes. Hence me. And he had the audacity to send a letter as if it were some twisted confession. I spent the remainder of the day on the phone contacting credit bureaus, deleting accounts, freezing reports, and putting up fraud alerts. It seemed like I was clearing up a disaster I hadn't even realized existed. But this is when things got even weirder. That night, after supper, my mother called. I didn't respond. Then she wrote, "There's something in your room you need to see." I didn't let them touch it. I dismissed it at first. I didn't trust anything in that house, yet curiosity set in. I texted Ben again and asked if he could check. He returned the next morning and discovered a shoebox under my old bed, with my name scribbled in black marker. Inside were receipts, broken up greeting cards and messages, and items I'd written when I was younger, including a letter I sent to myself when I turned 18. A meaningless letter full of hope and plans. But behind all of that was something I never expected. A bank. My mother created an account in my name when I was 14. She put in modest sums, $50 here, $20 there, and had saved almost $3,500 in that account by the time I was 21. But I'd never seen the money. I had no idea the account existed. She didn't tell me since my father emptied it 2 weeks after I turned 21. He assumed I knew. He assumed I had squandered it. I had not. Everything was coming into focus. He didn't simply disrespect me. He took from me. He buried my future with humor, power, and falsehoods. And what about my brother and sister? They just stood about and laughed, never questioning how I could work 2 jobs and live like I had nothing. That night, I made a decision. They weren't just poisonous. They were hazardous. On Tuesday morning, I had everything I needed. Proof of the credit cards in my name, the depleted bank account, and the letter my father wrote as if it were a journal entry no one would ever read. My uncle helped me scan everything. We created a folder called Fraud and Theft, and forwarded it to the lawyer his coworker advised. I sat across from the attorney and let her go through it. She was calm and professional. After 10 minutes she glanced up and said, "He's committed multiple federal crimes. If you want to press charges, we can start right now." I didn't respond. I just nodded. Not because I was prepared to take my father to court. I wasn't sure I'd ever be, but I wanted him to know I was capable, that I wasn't afraid anymore. The strange thing is, I wasn't even irritated by then. Not in a shouting, red-hot way. It was quieter and cooler. The type of rage that just observes. The sort that waits. That afternoon, something happened that turned everything upside down again. My mother showed up. She did not call first. She arrived in an old vehicle that I didn't recognize, and sat in the driveway until I walked out. My uncle offered to join me, but I ordered him to stay. I needed to see what she had to say in person. He gave me a shopping bag. Inside were a slew of strange items. An old USB, a few childhood images, a stack of school diplomas, and, in the bottom, something heavy. My high school notebook, which I assumed had been discarded. She had saved it. "I grabbed what I could," she explained. He intended to burn it. I questioned why she was even there. He did not hesitate. "I'm leaving him." I looked at her, trying to decide whether I believed her. She did not wait for me to speak. She said she had previously consulted with a lawyer. She had been planning it for months. She just hadn't told anyone. And then, without blinking, she said something more. Apparently, for years, my father had been borrowing money from relatives in my name, claiming I was unwell, needed tuition assistance, or was experiencing a private issue. It wasn't only my uncle's $7,000. In addition, my cousin's father received $4,500. Another $4,000 for my great aunt, who was retired and receiving Social Security. He told all of them the same thing. "Don't tell Rebecca. She's embarrassed." I couldn't say anything. She took out her phone and showed me screenshots of bank transfers. They all occurred during a 6-month period, during which time I was working 2 jobs and barely affording petrol. I inquired why she hadn't told me. She stated I had trusted him for too long. Then she started weeping. I did not console her. I wanted to. Some of me still craved my mother, but another part of me couldn't let go. I simply stood there, letting her come apart. Then I turned around and walked back in. That night, after dinner, I told my uncle and aunt everything. My cousin listened silently. At the conclusion, he got up and walked to his room, returning with an envelope. It held $1,800 in cash. He laid it in front of me and said, "We always figured something was wrong. We've been setting this aside for months. It's yours." I gazed at it for a long time. I couldn't recall the last time I received something without expecting anything in return. I did not touch it that night. I simply thanked him and went to bed. But I did not sleep. Instead, I remained up to arrange all of the papers, screenshots, credit reports, images of my ruined room, Everything my sister and brother sent me, and even a message from my father's supervisor wondering if I was all right. I put it all in a folder and scribbled only 5 words on the cover in Sharpie. You don't own me anymore. The following morning, I traveled to my parents' house. Nobody was outdoors. I stepped up to the porch, threw the folder into the mailbox, and then left without knocking. I did not feel like I had won. I felt like I'd finally walked out of a jail I wasn't aware I was in. They weren't following me because they understood they had erected the walls themselves. 2 weeks have gone. Not one word. There were no furious texts, guilt-laced voicemails from my mother, or snarky notes from my sister. Only stillness. And stillness worried me more than any of their normal turmoil because silence indicated that something had changed. I kept anticipating a blow-up, a Facebook tirade from my father, a dramatic apologies from my sister, or a backhanded message from my brother, but there was none. They vanished as if they were from the same planet I was still standing in. During those weeks, my uncle drove me to see the attorney again. We completed documentation to report the identity theft, launched investigations into the accounts associated with my name, and reported the social security number. Before filing any documents, the lawyer asked me one question. Are you doing this for justice or closure? I answered both. But deep down, I had no idea what closure meant anymore. All I knew was that I would not allow them retain anything that belonged to me. Not my money, not my identity, and absolutely not my quiet. By the 3rd week, I began to feel like a normal person again. I awoke without that tight sensation in my chest, like if I were late for something I didn't want to do. I had found a new part-time job through my aunt's coworker. Office employment, study hours, and no yelling. I had my phone set to do not disturb most of the time. Then out of nowhere, I received a message from my brother. It was brief. Can we meet? I looked at it for a long time. If it had come from anybody else, I would have blocked it without hesitation. But something prompted me to say yes. Not for him. For me. I told him we would meet at a diner on the outskirts of town. We are on neutral ground. I arrived first, sat at a booth in the back and watched the door. When he stepped in, he appeared smaller than I recall. Same hoodie and slouched posture, but no smugness this time. He didn't even sit down immediately. The first thing he said wasn't hi. It was Dad's unraveling. He sat down and didn't sugarcoat it. My mother had gone, filed for divorce, collected whatever money she could, and leased a little 1-bedroom apartment near her sister's house. My father did not oppose it. He just drank more. I started contacting old pals at 2 a.m. and yelling. I missed work. Got written up. Then he stated something unexpected. He told me he believes you are going to file charges. I did not react. He continued going. My sister allegedly attempted to apply for another credit card in my name. She had not noticed the accounts were locked. She was flagged immediately. She panicked out and fled town without informing anyone. We blocked him and our mother, and then he vanished. She responded. You ruined her life, he continued. I couldn't help laughing. He then looked at me and said, I used to think you were dramatic, but I was just blind. I didn't want to admit we were the problem. I believed him. Not because I wanted to, but because he had not asked for anything. There is no forgiveness or reconciliation, only honesty. We sat down for an hour. No ranting, no blaming. I did not weep. I did not tell him I missed him. I never said I'd come back. I just responded, don't speak for me again, ever. He nodded. Then we paid and left separately. It was the last time I saw him. Back at home, my Uncle Mike was waiting at the kitchen table. He inquired about how things turned out. I answered, civil, that was good enough for him. Then he stated something I had not expected. You're not going anywhere. Not yet. Stay through the spring. Save more. Don't rush to rent a box just to feel independent. You've got a home here, no strings attached. I felt a tightening in my throat. Not because I needed to be saved, but because for the first time, someone provided unconditional support. I spent the next month sinking into a feeling I hadn't had in years. Stability. No fighting. There were no bogus apologies or money stolen, just peaceful dinners, laundry that wasn't anybody else's problem, and a door that kept locked till I opened it. The material we submitted to the authorities set off a cascade of events. My father lost his job after they conducted a background check and uncovered the fraud charge. Nobody phoned me to beg for compassion. My sister never emerged. My mother wrote one letter to my Aunt Laura, stating that she was beginning again and did not expect forgiveness. I did not react. I didn't need vengeance. I didn't need closure. I had tranquility. By the end of April, my savings had increased. The $23,000 I left with had increased to over $30,000. I had work opportunities, people who didn't know about my family problems, and a plan. I visited a little apartment along the river. It was light and peaceful, with enough space for a workstation and a second-hand sofa. I informed my Uncle Mike that I was thinking about it. He responded, "You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Stay until you're ready and want to go." So I stayed for a little more, and every day I woke up and recalled one thing. They assumed I was the servant.